Here we go, folks. 1 versus 2, and they play in the same conference, in the same division. They're rivals. What else could we ask for? Georgia, Tennessee in Athens on Saturday. Charlie Burris is here to break down the balls for us. You can catch Charlie on A to Z Sports. It's the Big Orange Podcast. Charlie, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. You said it best right there. What more could you ask for? Almost literally nothing. It doesn't get bigger or better than what's coming this weekend. I mean, isn't it in the modern era, since they had the divisions in the SEC, only the third time there's ever been a 1 versus 2 game. So we're seeing a shooting star here, and somehow Tennessee's involved. I can't believe it, but here we are.
I did not see that statistic. I would guess that at least one of those other two, if not both of those, were Alabama LSU matchups.
Correct. That is correct. Yep.
They're also playing a pretty big ball game on the Western Division side. So a lot to be sorted out this weekend. Let's check out Tennessee and Georgia. And, that old adage, that old term of irresistible force, immovable object seems to apply to the Tennessee offense and the Georgia defense. They continue to rank in the top 2 or 3 in any metric on the defensive side for the Bulldogs, and the same applies for Tennessee, which the offense just seems to be more and more productive, even when playing a quality Kentucky defense with a 44 spot last week, which has lifted this offense to number 1 in the nation in points per game, number 1 in passing, and yards per play, and across the board, just explosive and efficient.
It's almost hard to believe what this offense has done, but this week is really, I think the best way to say it is like something has to give here. Somebody is going to get theirs, whether it is Georgia's defense or Tennessee's offense. And it feels like, to me, in that matchup, Tennessee's offense is going to win out. They've just been so good, and they just keep getting better. They could have put 60 on Kentucky. That's the craziest part of that storyline with Tennessee's offense in that game. I think that Tennessee's defense ended up being the overall story of the game. They held Kentucky to 6 points, and if you thought that was going to be the case, you are lying. Crazy. But as far as the offense goes, I mean, they had a few drives where Kentucky sacked Hooker and got them behind the sticks, and they ended up sputtering out. And Tennessee, with a more efficient performance, could have laid even more on those boys. And so now you go into Kentucky playing the best football of the year now on both sides of the ball, apparently, where the defense really got something figured out, I think, in that Kentucky game. Does that mean they'll be able to stop Brock Bowers and that whole attack? We'll see. But I think the most insane thing in this entire ride with Tennessee this season has been that they just keep getting better. And it doesn't even matter. They've had all these injuries and all these different things. Injuries, the captain of the team getting arrested. He's now back. He came back for the Kentucky game. Jalen McCullough was a defensive captain. And they've had all of this stuff happen, and they just get better somehow. And now you have Tillman back at wide receiver, McCullough back in the defensive backfield, and also you're getting held. These are lesser names on that defense, but important names when it comes to depth. Christian Charles, Kamal Haddon should be back and able to participate. You got good play from Brandon Turnage, who was a depth piece and then has gotten elevated, and now he's playing well. And specifically from Danico Slaughter, who filled in for Jalen McCullough, now has gotten his legs under him, and he had an interception in that Kentucky game and a massive hit that led to an interception in that game. So it's week over week, like they're sucking the soul out of the opponent that they play and then gaining their power. They're like just getting more and more and more and building up. And will that translate to a win over Georgia? I don't know. We're just going to have to see.
Nolan Smith is going to miss this game and the remainder of the season. One of the best and most talented players in America for the Georgia Bulldogs. Their best pass rusher. We expect Chaz Chambliss and Marvin Jones Jr. to take his place, take those reps. Jalen Carter back for Georgia this past Saturday against Florida. You seem extremely confident for a team that's an 8-point dog on the road.
It is just the mentality that this team plays with, because I think they're playing in a way where they just are supremely confident, but they also know that it's all kind of house money. Like, they're all aware that they weren't supposed to be here. They know how people talked about them in the preseason and what was expected of them this season and the history of Tennessee football in the last 20 years. I mean, they know the situation. And I think it's just that. You add those two things together, the supreme confidence and the thought that they're kind of playing with house money, and then you add in Georgia's the defending national championship champion, and this is potentially the end of the road for them if they lose this game. So more pressure on Georgia, playing with house money on Tennessee's side. I feel like that's a scary combination. Now, where Georgia, I think, is lucky in this instance is that this game is in Sanford Stadium. So they're going to have the home field advantage. And, I mean, the home field advantage for Tennessee against Alabama was brutal. 17 penalties for Alabama, a bunch of pre-snap penalties that were caused by the crowd almost exclusively. And here, you're not going to have that on Georgia's side. So you got to think their offense is going to play cleaner, not going to make as many mistakes, and you're going to have to play them more straight up than you played Alabama. You're not going to have the crowd intervention in the same way. The way Tennessee runs offense, I'm not as scared for Tennessee's offense. Like, I think the tempo, if it's run correctly, pretty much takes the crowd out of it, because you'll hit a play. First down, the crowd can be loud. But you hit a play and you line up in 10 seconds, the crowd doesn't even have time to kind of react. And neither does the defensive coordinator for the opposing team. And they kind of take the crowd out of it that way. And I think Heupel's going to be extremely conscious of that, not just for the crowd, but also to keep Hendon Hooker upright, make sure that he's not spending too much time in the pocket back there. And it could certainly be a factor, but if the crowd is a big factor for Tennessee's offense, they're doing something wrong. I would put it that way. Tennessee's already off if the crowd is a huge factor for their offense. So I don't know. There's just a lot of push and pull in this one where you go, Georgia has a superior defense. Tennessee has a superior offense. Can Tennessee's defense stop Georgia's offense, which is a good offense, but it's not a world beater? I don't know. It just depends on how much you value kind of mentality, pressure on the other team, things like that. Because, yeah, straight up, Georgia has the talent advantage and across the board. But Tennessee has that advantage of just the kind of playing with reckless abandon, coming from their coach, coming from all their players, coming from the leaders on that team. And I think that could be a really, really big factor in this one. You know, one team's playing clinched, playing uptight, and the other one's not. Things can go haywire. But, you know, Kirby's a good coach. I'm sure he'll have his boys prepared. We'll see. Because
if you do take the simplistic approach that you just did, and I've certainly thought of it, you've got probably the best offense in the country. And when I make that statement, people nitpick Ohio State's. When I say
Tennessee's number one in scoring and total offense.
I mean, they're like this. So yeah. You might, if they're in the top three, you know, they're as good as anyone. So anyway, best offense in the country. And again, I'll say the same thing about Georgia. It may not be the best defense in the country, but it's so close. Okay, best defense in the country. So then you flip to the other side of the ball, the weak side of the ball for each team. And my first thought is that Georgia has a better offense than Tennessee has a better defense, but this Tennessee defense continues to play better and better and better and better.
That defensive line specifically gets discounted. I may have said that on this show last week, talking about the Kentucky game. I think Kentucky, it was honestly pretty clear to me. Will Levis and that Kentucky offense thought they were going to come in and put up 400 yards offense on Tennessee and score like 35 points. And that defensive line is just actually stout. They really are. They've gotten a lot of sacks, tons of hurries. If you want to see it against good teams, go back and watch the Alabama game and LSU game. You know, any of those where they can really get into that backfield. What was it? 5 sacks against LSU? Like they really can be the real deal. In the secondary, I just think week by week, they are getting it figured out. last week being kind of the crowning achievement of that, where they held Kentucky to 6 points and Will Levis looked foolish. Three interceptions on Will Levis, and they laid a bunch of really good hits. They were tackling really effectively. It was just honestly impressive across the board. Kentucky's offense is nowhere close to Georgia's offense. Let's be honest here. But Georgia's offense can have a bad day. Tennessee's offense, if they can have a bad day, they haven't had it yet. So do with that what you will. They have laid the wood to everybody they played on Tennessee's offense. But Georgia's offense can have a bad day. They did it against Missouri, and it was really bad, like really bad. And if they come with that, they're going to lose to Tennessee by multiple scores. I don't think they will. The game's in Sanford Stadium. I think that's kind of where they win that. Again, to what I was saying earlier, it's going to help them play more mistake-free ball. I think they're going to come extremely hyped up. It's number 1 versus number 2. If you don't come hyped up for this game, why are you playing college football? That's ridiculous. So you're correct. Georgia's offense should be able to move the ball in Tennessee's defense, but Georgia's offense has had an off day. That's all. The possibility is there. That's been my overarching talking points with this. Is Georgia, quote unquote, the better team? Probably. But the chance for Tennessee to win this is more than there, I think. And if Georgia doesn't come with their best game, they could be in for a doozy here. If that makes sense.
We see it all over the place that the more talented team is not always the best team. You need to have the talent, but you need to have it functioning on all cylinders and working together at a high rate. And not saying Georgia's not, but what I find interesting, and I don't believe in the A plus B equals C, like this team beat that team and then that team beat that team, therefore. But I do believe in a resume. I do believe if you can point to about 5 of those, then you can say, well, this team's probably better than this team because they have these 5 common opponents, and this is what happened. And unfortunately, we've only got one measuring stick, and that's Florida. They both played Florida. You would think at this point in the season, playing in the same division, they would have more matchups against like opponents, but it just doesn't work out that way. And they both played a similar game against Florida where they had control of the game. Georgia more recently, this past weekend, boom, they shoot out of the gate, 21-3, 28-3, whatever it was. And then I tuned it out, and then 28-20. and Florida gave them a scare, but I don't know if it was a serious scare. It wasn't like, it felt like, okay, they're going to pull this upset. But they did give them a scare. Anytime a team's within one score, you know, it needs to be taken seriously. But then Georgia put them away. And it was similar against Tennessee as well.
I think this is a good example of how Tennessee's improved over the season, because that was Tennessee's 3rd game of the year. Or 4th. It was their 4th game of the year, sorry. When they played Florida. And I think the defense for Tennessee would perform far better this time around. And if you put up 38 points again, like you did against Florida, I think you probably hold Florida to 20 this time around. And at one point in that game, Tennessee had a 17-point lead. I believe it was 38-21 at one point in that game. And that's what the final score should have been. And I think if they played again today, it might even be worse than that, honestly. I think Florida's actually kind of taken some steps back throughout the season. Brenton Cox just got tossed off the team. So, you know, whatever is going on there, that's between them and Billy Napier. But I think that you can look at as growth for Tennessee. And yeah, I mean, that Florida game for Georgia, that just showed they're just really strong. I don't think they are as good as last year, but not being as good as last year, you know, you're not as good as a team that had one of the best defenses in the history of college football. Okay. Well, that could mean a lot of things, you know? And so to me, it just comes down to a couple of things. Can Tennessee score? And can Tennessee disrupt Stetson Bennett? If they can do those 2 things effectively, put up close to 40 points, I have to think. Hopefully you don't need 50 like you did against Alabama. And I don't think they will, because I think Georgia's going to be a little more slow, a little more plodding, methodical with their offense, slow the game down. But if you can put up 40 and disrupt the backfield, stop the run, get to Stetson Bennett, and make sure, I mean, honestly, you're not going to stop Brock Bowers. I don't. Tennessee fans don't like these kind of talking points, but here's the truth. Tennessee does not have the talent at the defensive back position to stop Brock Bowers. They just don't. And some guy, 5-star DB, is not walking through that door this week. And so you have to start with Stetson Bennett. You have to make sure he just can't get the ball off, or the ball off effectively. Get in his face, make sure he's throwing off his back foot, make sure he's disrupted hearing footsteps. And if you can do those things, I think they can stop the run. I think they will stop the run. I keep Georgia to around 100 yards. That's what they did with Alabama, around 100 yards rushing. And then get Stetson Bennett 2-3 times. Stall drives out with sacks and make sure that he's disruptive and feeling shadows behind him. And it's right there for Tennessee. But that is a tall, it's easy to say that. It's a very tall order. I think a lot of Tennessee fans this week are really, really feeling like this is it. We're going to grab a national championship. And Georgia's really good. I feel supremely confident in this Tennessee football team. Georgia's really good, man. I don't know. To me, like in my analysis of the game, it just comes down to that home field advantage. It almost feels like to me that might be the tipping point, where it just keeps Georgia from committing fatal mistakes. And that could be the advantage. But I guess it'll just have to play out.
Yeah, Tennessee wins the biggest game that they played in forever against Alabama, but it's at home. And now, in some respects, this is a bigger game because it's in division and they're playing for an SEC championship game appearance, but it's on the road. So now Tennessee, the challenge is, can they show us that they're the same team on the road as at home against Georgia? And let's understand, this is sports. So what you just pointed out, I think is worth underlining. That both teams could excel this. They could both be excellent, tremendous teams. They could be two of the top 3 teams in the country. One of them has to lose the game.
Yeah.
One of them has to lose the game.
In the most simplistic terms possible, I think if both teams bring their absolute A game, Georgia wins by a hair. I think just their talent talent and depth takes them over the top. If Tennessee plays its A game, Georgia plays a B game, Tennessee wins, and vice versa. So that's 2 scenarios where Georgia wins and 1 where Tennessee wins. So that's like the most elementary way I can put it. So do you believe in the 33% chance for Tennessee or the 67% chance for Georgia? That's how I would put it. So overly simplistic, but it's how I feel.
Charlie Burris, Big Orange Podcast. Get on over there. Check out Charlie's work on A to Z Sports, and you see his Twitter handle right there. Charlie, we always appreciate the conversation. Enjoy the game.
Absolutely, Mark. Thanks again for having me on.